Wes, good to see you. I'm really excited about today's topic, a tax smart alternative to cash. Following several rate hikes by the Fed, investors can once again earn attractive rates on cash. But after accounting for taxes, your investment might not even be keeping pace with inflation. So, what are some questions a risk averse investor should consider before buying CDs, treasuries, or other cash savings?
Well, first of all, having an alternative for cash, there's no real substitute for pure cash because anything we do besides cash is going to have, of course, some modicum of risk to it, right?
Mhm.
But when we're looking at what to do with cash that's sitting on the sidelines, we have to ask ourselves, is this CD going to provide the rate of return that we're seeking when we account for inflation and taxes? So those are two kind of silent things that can eat away at returns, and we have to be cognizant of them. So there are alternatives today, Aaron, that are quite innovative, but they're not cash or a CD.
Right. So let's talk through some of those alternatives then, specifically buffered ETFs, which do offer principal protection in some cases. Again, we're coming back to that argument. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to lose some money, right?
That's right. That's right. And this is something that we think are really innovative for portfolios. And we've been using them for a handful of years now. And not only just for cash, Aaron, but as an alternative for holding on to traditional bonds. So
Hmm.
there's many different kinds of them, but let's just make it super simple, right? So when you have a buffered ETF, you have an upside cap that the position can earn over a outcome period. So let's say that's a 12-month period, just to keep it simple. So you know exactly going in for the next 12 months, you have a cap of what you can earn. So maybe that's 10%, 12%, or 15%. So if the underlying reference asset, which could be something like a S&P 500 fund. If the S&P 500 fund is up, say 20%, and you have an upside cap of 15, well, you're going to miss out on some of that upside
Hmm.
potentially, right? But most importantly, the reason why we miss out on some of the upside if it does more than what the cap is because the fund provides a downside buffer. So it's almost kind
Hmm.
of like having a little bit of, a surety to your money that you have an initial amount of loss that would be absorbed or buffered should the reference asset like the S&P 500 be down a certain amount. So maybe that
Hmm.
looks like having a buffer of 15% on the downside with that corresponding cap that's something like 15% on the upside.
Hmm.
So it's a risk return profile that can be pretty attractive, that can help us keep up with inflation, but not take a bunch of undue risk with cash over that time period.
All right, so now let's talk about one of your favorite topics, taxes, right? We have to consider taxes and cash alternatives, and bonds are all subject to income taxes, whereas buffered ETFs do not generate taxable interest.
That's right. So it allows the investor and the advisor to work together to really maximize the tax situation and decide whether or not it's time to realize gains or just hold on to it and let the position still accrue over time. So, like you said, a buffered ETF does not generate income or realize those internal gains that can be pretty pesky on the on the tax situation year over year. So they're pretty tax efficient when you're keeping that in mind.
Hmm. I'm really glad we got to talk this through. And Wes, I'm sure some people probably have questions because, as you mentioned, they're relatively new, but something you specialize in. So, how can people get a hold of you if they'd like to learn more about buffered ETFs?
They can reach out to us via email, Aaron, info@patriotwealthnc.com, or the old fashioned way, just give us a buzz, 919-322-4113.
All right, Wes, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.